All right, so now in this video, I want to go over how we can control the breaker manually during the simulation. Like what if I don't want to, let's have a look. So like, what if I don't want this breaker to automatically turn on at 50 seconds, like what this component was doing right over here. It was set up in a way that if I double click this, it says number of breaker operation was 1. So one time it will do something where initially it says it will have an open state, and at 20 seconds it will change the state of the output coming out of this block. So it basically outputs either a 0 or a 1, which then goes into my breaker, and then that my breaker is basically the signal which is inside this breaker over here, which then basically turns the breaker on and off. But so instead of me controlling it with automatically with this, what if I want to be able to manually control it? So that is also very simple. So you know what I'm gonna bring it to the side. I'm gonna disable it just so you guys can see that we're not using this here. Now, for us to just be able to send a 1 and a 0 into this component, how can it do this? Well, then you just come back here in components at the top, and we're going to use something called right here, which is a switch. So if I'm just going to click it, bring it right over here, just like that, like this. And what does that switch do? So if you double click it, it just says two-state switch. I'm just going to name it breaker switch. Doesn't do anything. Doesn't play a role in compiling it. Or if you don't give it a name, that's okay as well. Um, Now it's got a few options. It's saying display title on icon. So we're going to say initially, I'm going to say the state is off. Output. Now one thing is output value in an on state. So if we keep this switch on, I want this to, let's say, output 1. And if the state is off, then I want it to output 0. So it's going to do a 1 or a 0. Convert output to the nearest integer. So we're not going to worry too much about it. We're not putting in any value of 1 point something, but we're putting a 1 or a 0, so we don't have to worry about it. And now text for on position and off position. So for that, I'm going to have to show you how we can. For that, I have to first bring you the actual control point where the HMI or the graphic where we're going to control this. So press OK. Now we got the signal, we got the switch, but how do you turn on the switch? If I double click this, it just opens up the properties. How do I control the switch? Now, for you to do that, you can only control these, or one way to control this is we click here for the switch, but you come over here, it says graphs. Even though it says graphs, it could be sometimes misleading, but really what I need is a control panel. And that is applicable really to any one of these, couple of the other switches as well. But let's talk about this one. So I'm going to click it, bring it right over here, and all I'm going to do really is just going to move this down. All right. So now you have to click this, copy it, and you have to now paste it into this control panel. And then based on whatever switch you had picked, those are the options that will pop up. So what I mean by that is if I click it and delete it, and let's assume if I were using a slider, if I bring the slider in, I haven't even configured it or anything like that. If I just right click, if I click it, copy it, and then just to control V onto this, look at that. Look, like the inside of it basically changes based on whatever switch you put in. So before we'll get into the slider later on. But first I want to go back to my switch. So I'm going to go here, breaker switch, control C it, control V it, bring it back, and now it talks about breaker switch. Now, the name of that is getting picked up from whatever I named it here. So let's see, I'm going to make it, let's say like that, and you will see it changes right there. And now it tells you that text for on position. So just to prove a point, so I'm just going to say on BRK so you guys can see the change right there, right? So on breaker, like that. And then, similarly, you could do that for off breaker as well if you needed to, but you could see it starts to get a little bit messy down there. So I'm just going to get rid of that there and press OK. All right, so we know when it's in the off position, it's going to output a 0. So this switch will be outputting a 0 out of it, which will then get saved in here. And then if I keep it in on position, it will just change into a 1. And just to even further prove my point, I'm just gonna actually take another one, put a scope right there. And what about just to show you guys when I change the output, you guys can then see the changing of the states coming out of this button right there as well. All right, so I'm gonna do that and then start the simulation. Okay, all right. Okay, so now that the simulation is running, and you could see right here it says 0, and it's outputting a 0, which basically is, think about it, it's a little bit counterintuitive. When the breaker switch outputs a 0, the breaker is actually in a closed position. So my name of off is not correct. So I'm gonna, and then if I now click it to, let's say 1, and you can see right there, the right here, you could see before it was 0, now it turned into 1 when I clicked it. So it's dynamic. So within the simulation, I'm now able to change these inputs here. And you can see when I change it to 1, it now the breaker is now open. So clearly my name of on breaker at 1 is not correct. So what I could do is I could just stop the simulation, edit parameters, and now I know one thing, that the output value in an on state is 1, but the text should say off breaker, okay, off breaker, and this should say on breaker, just like that. So the whole point, I wanted to be able to tell you guys how it matters what you're naming this. You want to make sure that what you're passing to a certain signal, sometimes you may think that it would do something, whether it would close or open, but it might just be doing something opposite. So you want to be careful and make sure your switches are outputting the values that you want them to output based on your application. So let's say in this case, it's going to compile, and we're going to see that now it's going to start to make sense. So it starts to run right there. So you can see now I'm saying on breaker. If I put an off breaker, it's outputting a 1. So if I now annotate this quickly, you could see this right here. The very first thing so you create a breaker. You create a switch like that. Once you create a switch, copy paste it into the control panel, because that's what you'll be using on and off for, or this is what you'll be using to turn it on or off, or to change the states of this switch.